joining us today. We really appreciate it. I hope wherever you are, the weather is better than what we're experiencing in Boston, which is torrential rain and high winds. But always being the optimist, I will say at least it's not snowing out. So that's my happy thought for today. We appreciate all of you being with us and taking the time. We hope today is going to be very valuable for you. Your screens, you should be able to see a poll. And we'd ask that you answer that poll. The question is, how often do you think about ROI when investing in your development office? And about midway through today's webinar, we're going to switch the question and add a second question. Guys out, and we'll try to point that out as soon as it becomes available. I do want to let you know that I'm joined in the room today by Jill Goldenberg and Solomon Flack, who are part of the Generations National team, as well as another member of the team, Susie. Hi, me. We also have with us Harry Bloom, and Harry is remote. So if there is a momentary lapse in sound, we apologize, but it's the wonderful use of technology. So we're glad that that everybody could be with us. At PEJE, we have been supporting day schools for well over 15 years, actually, almost approaching our high birthday next year. And we have been hearing very much from the field that more and more schools are approaching their work and thinking about their office like a business, that they're focusing on ROI, that they know that they need to run their school to focus on both the students, the education, but also the bottom line as a business does. And so with that in mind, we created the 3 national revenue programs. Each of these programs is focused on one area of revenue that we believe is critical to a day school's long-term sustainability. So today, we're going to be focusing on 2 of our programs that focus within the development office, that is Governance and Fundraising Academy and Generations National. For well over a decade, PEJE has been promoting the idea of professionalizing the development office and the development role in schools. And today we are proud to say that there are more professionals in more day schools focusing on development than ever before. We thank you in the room who have made this commitment and understand how important it is, as well as many, many schools across the country. But you're probably asking yourself, well, why did PEJE need to develop 2 programs for the development office? We have our Auntie Danu program, which focuses on recruitment and retention. But why 2 for development? Why is there that need? And the answer actually is pretty simple, and we came to this conclusion ourselves as well, that development offices, like many other offices, fall on a continuum. They generally start with the basics, and then they end up at the other end of the continuum as highly efficient and sophisticated operations. And we know that many of you fall towards that end of the spectrum, while many other schools also are closer to the beginning of their individual development offices. Right, there's a buzz on the line, so I'm going to mute all of the lines, and I'm going to ask Harry to unmute his line by pressing #5.
The leader has muted your line. To unmute your line, press #6.
I hope so. If you can write a note in the chat box saying yes, that would be great. Obviously, I can't hear the answer because I muted you. So as I was saying, we really believe that thinking about the holistic needs of a development office was really important, and that's why we developed 2 programs. And that's why you're here today, because you want to understand how each of these programs can positively impact your school and your development efforts. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn to our agenda and share with you what our goals are for today. So I'm going to start with doing some introductions, because not only am I joined by my peers at PEJE, but we have some lay and professional leaders from the field with us. We're then going to specifically talk about these programs and why we believe that they are a very sound investment for schools across the country and, in fact, across all of North America. We're then going to allow our guests to have a virtual panel discussion. And, of course, we know that there's going to be many questions that come up throughout the conversation. So we'll leave time at the end to answer those questions. And the best way to document those questions for us will be to use the chat box on the webinar screen. So at any point in time, you should feel free to type in a question, and we will try to answer those questions either in the moment, real time, or later on during the Q&A session. So with that, I want to welcome our very special guests who we are extremely appreciative of for joining us today. And we have 4 of them. Each of these people and their schools have participated in programs with PEJE and are going to be sharing some of what they've learned and what their experiences has been. So I'd like to thank first Caroline Waldman, and she comes from Gordon School, from the Beth David congregation in Miami, Florida, which I'm sure is having a beautiful and sunny day today. We have Jody Bruce, who's the head of school at the Lehrman Community Day School, also in Miami Beach. We have Sippy Shore, who's the head of school at Beth Tefillah in Baltimore, and Gary Leiner, who's a board chair from Sinai Akiba in Los Angeles. So we welcome all of you, and we thank you for being with us. I'm now going to turn it over to Harry and ask Harry to spend just a few minutes briefly talking about our history with programs and why we are very confident that we've created programs that have strong and lasting ROIs for each of you. Harry?
Thank you, Jim. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. So, PEJE feels that after, nearly 16 years of implementing programs involving capacity building in the pursuit of tangible benefits, students, dollars, et cetera, that we have kind of put together the right mix to achieve a high return on time and dollars invested. So we have, in the shape of or form of Jill Goldenberg, and I modestly include myself as a minor person relative to Jill, but we both have a lot of experience managing programs and leading staffs that are managing programs involved with large-scale change. We also have put together programs in the form of Generations National and the Governance and Fundraising Academy with measurable goals. These are not ethereal programs. We actually have tangible goals we're going to be working toward with the participating schools. And we've put together a mix of assessment tools that have proven as their diagnostic capabilities in the past, convenings led by expert presenters with rich peer opportunities for school professionals and lay leaders to network together. And you'll hear a lot about that from the 4 guests. Significant coaching time to help schools develop plans, build their capacity to implement those plans, and then manage to review progress and take corrective action where necessary. We've built in team learning into the program and cross-school peer learning. So if you put those elements together, we feel that they deliver high return on time and dollar investment. And that will be compounded by the fact that there's matching funding. I'd like to talk about one of the programs we're addressing today, which is our Governance and Fundraising Academy, and the ROI potential here. This program is modeled on the Leadership and Fundraising Academy that PEJE has been implementing now in nearly a half dozen communities, most recently in South Florida, hence Jody Bruce and Caroline Waldman, who are actively participating in that program now, as well as in Montreal, New York, Los Angeles, and Texas. Leadership and Fundraising Academy has a lot of the same elements as Governance and Fundraising Academy. The schools that participate the year after the program have averaged a 10% increase in their annual fundraising on the pathway to much more. In fact, our current cohort of 20 schools in Texas and South Florida, actually during the program, which is unprecedented, has averaged a 9% increase in fundraising. So we're on the way to more after the program. Strong gains in board engagement and in strengthening of professional staff are also a hallmark of these programs, meaning a focus on how to involve the board and staff in getting lay leaders to ask for and cultivate donors who can give major gifts. The program cost was designed to be $17,750 payable over 2 years, and it was designed to get a high return on investment. If you're a school, for example, with a $500,000 annual campaign, the year after the program, we expect you to realize 3 times your investment. If you have a smaller program, we expect you to realize at least a first year after the program return on your investment. And if your campaign is bigger, you'll have an even better return. So we priced the program appropriately. Also, we're going to focus on major gifts in the program so that there's a potential for even larger returns down the road. And we expect the schools that are gaining these skills and capacity to ultimately achieve top third performance of all day schools, which means $2,500 to $4,000 per student per year in annual funds raised. So now I'm turning it over to my colleague Jill to talk about the Generations National Program.
Hi, everybody. I hope that you are all doing well. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about Generations National before turning it over to the stars of today, which are our leaders in the field, our school leaders. And for those of you who I've already spoken to a couple times about this program, some of this may be familiar, but really the key thing that I want to hone in on is what you can expect at the end. At the end of the day, what we are looking for you to do is build out an endowment of $30 million per student. Now, obviously, for every single school, that's gonna that the equation will be different. The equation's the same. The end goal will be different. But in the first 3 years of the Generations National effort, what we expect that what you will see is a $4,000 per student increase in your endowment. And some of you I already know are already building endowment. The issue really is about when you begin. So if you've already started and you've already got $10,000 per student, great. We're going to increase that. We're going to work with you to increase that by $4,000 to get you up to the $14,000 number. The key, of course, and perhaps I said 30 million per student. I meant a 30,000 per student, and for some schools that will be a $30 million endowment. But forgive me for misspeaking. The key here is to give you the support, the tools, the training, the coaching, the background of proven results to get you to enable your school to be completely non-dependent on your annual campaign. One of the things that we, of course, want your annual campaign to survive and thrive and do great. That's critical because your donors for endowment are often your best donors to your annual campaign. And we would never ask you to choose between annual and endowment. And if you're making that choice, choose annual. What we are looking to do is help the schools that are ready to take that next step so that you are taking advantage of the largest wealth transfer in history, so that you have breathing room, so that at your finance committee meetings and at your board meetings and in your boardrooms, what you are doing is saying, not how can we make budget, but how can we spend the extra 5% that we are earning on our endowment. So in terms of the dollar amount, you've got to calculate your own ROI of investing in the program. It's a $50,000 program for the school. The total cost of the program is $100,000 per school, and it is with all of our programs payable over the program years, so it's payable over 3 years. And there is a little extra incentive that if you actually hit your benchmarks, you're going to get some of that money back. and it goes down to a $42,000 total investment. So in fact, we are looking at an ROI of more than 25 times your initial investment. Almost all of our schools in the Current Generations program, and that's your cue. I'm about to ask the first question to Zippy. So Zippy, I'm going to ask you to unmute your line at *5. The Current Generation schools, almost every single one of them has raised almost the entire first-year investment in the first 6 months of the program. And with that, I am going to turn it to the people that you really want to hear from, which is the people in the field who've experienced these programs. So Sippy, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to ask, what has the value been of your school's participation in Generation?
So Sippy, we can't hear you. I need to ask each of our panelists to press pound 5. Pound 5 to unmute.
Sorry.
And then we will be able, pound 6 should work on your phones. Pound 5 does them all. Pound 6 on your phone should unmute you. Sippy, are you there?
Sippy, I am seeing a 410 number, which I know is you, and you are still showing as muted. So while you're unmuting, I'm going to go right to Gary Leiner from Sinai Akiva.
Can you hear me now? Hello, hello?
Now we can hear you. Great, great. Gary, stay tuned.
So mine is pound 6.
Okay. Pound 6.
Pound 6 for all of our panelists. Thank you.
It would be helpful if I gave the right instruction. My apologies. Go ahead.
So do you want me to answer, or do you want...
Yes. What has the value been in your school of your participation in Generation?
So it really is profound. We've had an endowment in place, not as big as it is now, but we've had an endowment in place for many years. What this has done is focus the attention of our population, whether it's donors or annual givers or larger givers, on the importance of the future. And I have to tell you that that's atypical of the way many day schools, ours included in past years, think. If day schools are busy getting their bottom line and paying their payroll and making sure that they meet payroll, then for some the idea of thinking in terms of endowment is counterintuitive. However, if you focus an institution on the value of that and can show them how important it is, it changes the culture of the institution. There's one other thing that really I think is important for us, and other schools may have some of the same experiences. We have, our biggest donors are older, and in fact, some are already gone. Their children, God forgive them, do not have the same attitude about giving as they do. The idea of making sure that there is endowment and testamentary strength in our base means that we can invest in the future in a way that is much more secure and much more certain.
Great, thank you. Harry?
So I'd like to address my my question to Caroline and to Jody, maybe in that sequence, if that's okay with you. You are both about to wrap up an 18-month Leadership and Fundraising Academy experience. Could you please, just in a few words, describe the difference that you feel the Leadership and Fundraising Academy has made to the development and governance program at your school? So maybe starting, Caroline, if you would comment first, as the board chair of Gordon Schools.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
We can, thank you.
Great. For our school and for our board, it just has been, we are a completely different board 18 months later, and we're just a completely different institution in our focus on fundraising and then having a true process and a creating a culture of the role of fundraising as board members. We had a lot of board members that were, sort of that felt that they needed to leave that to somebody else, and really being a part of this program has instilled that responsibility that they need to be either giving or supporting the efforts of fundraising in a much larger capacity, and it is now truly one of the main responsibilities as being a board member. And I think that's significant because it's increased the number of people that are actively working to fundraise for the school.
And this is Jody, and for us, in working with a coach who helped us develop a development plan, which we're able to refer to, back quite frequently, helped us really define the roles of each of the board members and what their responsibilities would be when taking on a board position at our school, and came and did one of our board retreats, which we have not had before. We had in light of the Leadership and Fundraising Academy, and just having her be so passionate about her work and expressing that in a way to our board members really made them see a different picture in their role as a board member. And because we have changeover in our board, having the development plan in place will be helpful to us, well into our future, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, as a document to be able to constantly refer back to. And again, I think most importantly, define their roles and responsibilities and the expectations that we now have of them. And the LFA provided a framework to be able to do that. Also having them participate, some of the board members, in the Leadership and Fundraising Academy sessions just gave them with, a lot more education in that field and provided them with the experiences that they would need to be successful in all of our fundraising endeavors.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Gary, I'm going to turn this to you and ask you a particular question about the structure of the program. How did being part of a larger program with other schools and with the benchmarks and goals help you? Why not just hire a coach and do this on your own?
Well, I'm assuming you can hear me. It's great to hire a coach, and I think it might have helped. But to put it in a larger context, it does a number of different things. First of all, you have an outside force that you've hired for your own benefit that's galvanizing you to act. Second of all, you have community members and competing and non-competing schools in your area who are also, and nationally, who are also doing this stuff, and so you can place yourself in a context there, and that really makes a difference. And I think just having somebody else kind of set the goals is a good way to start this process, because internally we didn't have the expertise yet, but we gained it through the Generations program. We didn't have the expertise to necessarily set our own goals properly, but with the coach and with the PEJE structure and with all the other things that go along with it and the national conferences and stuff, you really get a much better idea of what your goals should be and what are national benchmarks, and you can translate that into your program, and then we made it an effort to bring lay people to as many meetings as we could to spread the word and educate them and be able to be advocates internally in the organization to make raising money for endowment a big part of what we do.
Jill, can I make an analogy? This is Tippy. Can I make an analogy?
Sure.
And share one? I'm a teacher, so I think in educational terms. When you are in a classroom of students who are high achievers, there is a tendency to reach a little higher. It's referred to in rabbinic literature as kinat sofrim. You're allowed to be envious of someone who is learning and studying more. The same is true here. We are in a community of people who are reaching, and there is, I don't want to say competition, but certainly a feeling, as Gary said, of community, and a feeling that if others are reaching, it is accessible and reach, and you have the opportunity and the possibility of reaching as well. So being part of that community is very, very empowering.
Thank you, both Gary and Sati. Thank you so much, because what you're explaining is the power of the collective, and it really is so helpful.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Harry in just a second, but we've switched our poll question. So our second poll question today is, what was the last time your development office engaged in a formal training program? I hope you know the answer to this, and we're curious to see what those answers look like. I also just want to call out again that people can post questions on the chat box. And for schools that are on the phone with us, if you know that you are thinking about Generations National or Governance and Fundraising Academy, if you wouldn't mind typing that into the chat box as well, it'll be helpful for us as we help guide the questions to make sure that we try to answer as many questions as possible for all of you and provide you with the best possible information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harry.
So I'd like to ask, again, Caroline and Jody, to comment on the following. I mean, you've been now involved in a program with, I think, 11 peer schools or 10 peer schools in South Florida. What would you say to somebody who would ask the following question? What kind of day school can benefit from governance and fundraising? You know, are there some schools that would benefit more than others? Or do you see it as of value to pretty much any school?
Caroline, do you want to start, or you want me to?
Sure. You know, we're a smaller school, and for us, it's invaluable. I mean, the experience has been incredible, from the speakers, the coach, the sessions, and really hearing some of the stories from our peers and getting a chance to learn from other schools in our community, whether they be really close or even 1 or 2 counties over. I mean, I think it is critical, and I think any school of any size can always move along their stages in their development cycle or whatever their team might be doing, and can benefit significantly. We were a very fragmented school with sort of a hodgepodge of things that we were doing, and to be starting at almost at ground zero through this process and how far we've come in 18 months, I can only imagine if we had started at a broader point where we had much more structure, how much more we would have been able to benefit further. So I think a school of any size would benefit from participating in this program.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that regardless of the size of your school or where you're at your fundraising, everybody wants to do better. And part of the benefit of working with such a diverse groups of school was that it really made us perform better at what we do. It resulted in better decision making for us, and it lent us, you know, to explore very complex solutions to similar challenges that we were all facing, regardless of the size of our school or where we were at in the process. It presented us with a lot of new ideas and helped shift our thinking, enabling us to think differently about our situation, which ultimately, you know, prompted us to come up with better solutions and improved our outcome. And for us, although we had always been very successful with a small number of families in our annual campaign giving, it actually encouraged and pushed us to move towards a capital campaign for this year as well, and really had us take a different approach to our major donors, which for us has been the biggest shift and was one of the biggest parts of the program that we were able to capitalize on most, just in the manner in which we are stewarding major donors and more of the integrated asks that we've been educated and now have some experience in doing to be able to address, an endowment campaign, a capital campaign, an annual campaign, and to be able to tie all of those together in a way that feels good to your donors.
Thank you both very, very much, Caroline and Jody. Now back to Joe.
I'm going to ask Gary, if you could answer the next question, and then Tippy, I'm going to ask you a question after that. Gary, if you could explain, I'm noticing a lot of questions about coaching. How did your coach work with you? What type of, we heard wonderful information about the coaching in LFA. If you could share some of that same information about how your coach worked with you in Generations, that would be great. And then, Sippy, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a different question.
Well, our coach worked pretty intimately with our development director, and in terms of helping to just plan the overall schedule of what we needed to do each year or over the 3 years even, and to me to plant the idea of setting up a separate committee to deal with Generations, and also to then we had that committee. Lay leaders were chosen pretty carefully, people who have the time or had some time to embrace and were willing to learn. And, the coach was there to refine our case statement and to help us with how we approach donors and emphasizing things like listening to the donor. So it wasn't, I don't know if I'm answering the question exactly. I didn't work as intimately with the coach as our development director did, since as the board chair, but I certainly interacted with her at the meetings and after the meetings, the meeting after the meeting, of course. Am I answering the question? Are people feel that makes any sense?
Yeah, no, Gary, that's especially important to understand the, Lynn, I noticed that you asked a question about how does with whom does the coach actually connect? And so Gary, that was very helpful. The primary contact generally tends to be the development director. However, there's a team approach that we feel very strongly about because we've seen good results. Sippy, could you talk a little bit about that team approach and what does that mean in terms of working with lay leaders and professionals from the board on Generations?
Sure. I think, I don't know if it was Jody or Caroline who mentioned the idea of board engagement, and I think that you can point to a transformation of attitude on the part of board members when they are thrust into a situation where there are very clear-cut goals and where there are very clear-cut benchmarks and there are measurements against those benchmarks. And board members tend to do well with that. And so when you've got a team, you've got your board people, you've got your professionals who then become, in many ways, much more comfortable with board members, and board members see themselves as part of a team. Their responsibility for development becomes heightened, and then the hesitancy about an integrated ask where you're still asking for annual giving at the same time as asking people to think deeply about testamentary giving becomes, you become less self-conscious about that, because I can tell you that in the early years that was one of the key holdbacks in terms of our moving forward. We felt like we were asking too much. If you've got a team approach, you've got a coach and a board member and a professional on deck, then there is not only an integrated approach, but a unified, consistent approach, and everybody gives a certain amount of strength to the others.
Thank you, Tippy. That is so helpful to particularly to understand what kind of deep engagement there is on the board's part in both of these programs. And it really does depend on, as Jim began the webinar, it really does depend on where your school is in its development efforts. So the transformation occurs in both of these programs, and the outcome is really what we're looking at when we consider you for each of these programs. I know I'm going to turn it to Harry in 1 second. I see a number of questions have come up, and Jim, we're going to get to those in a little bit. Yeah?
We see that there's been a number of very specific questions around coaching, how they're matched, what the length of the engagement is, who they connect with, and how often, and we will answer all those questions in just a couple minutes. So Harry, do you want to ask the next question?
Well, I guess it's going to be sort of a final sort of summary question for me, because I know we want to get on to the questions from the participants. But Caroline and Jody, can you just comment on the following very simple question? What kind of return on investment do you feel you got from LFA and will get in the future?
Caroline, you want to start?
Sure, this is Caroline. For us, I would say that in our first year, we saw a return on investment from day one. We had a small, very passive fundraiser that we have every year. It generates, a few $1,000s, and just by beginning the lens and having that lens of a different process of fundraising, we more than doubled what we raised in a passive fundraiser, which got everybody excited that was doing fundraising to the point where we're now starting the year with a significant commitment of donors from last year who were some are ongoing donors, some were new donors who we got to commit to 3 years last year. And for us, that was huge. We began our year over 50% of our goal, just having really worked on these donors with a very methodical process, with a very different approach, and really cultivating those relationships further. The return for us was, as I've said, from the starting gates on. So I think that the impact is only going to be exponential as we go into our next level of donors, and as we go and revisit and continue cultivating those large donors further, who now feel that our process is much more professional, that our approach is comprehensive, that it's embraced broader by our leadership, whether they be lay leaders and our different professionals. And so our asks are just taken much seriously by our community than they have been in the past. And the proof is in having people who are coming back and saying, I have a relationship with somebody outside our media community who would be interested in supporting your efforts. And so it's incredible.
Thank you. Jody, any thoughts?
Yeah, so for us, there's been financial gains, but I think as importantly, there's an assumption that everyone has a director of development. So the program for us at least presented us with the importance of having a director of development, which we've been able to fund that position this year, partly based on the annual campaign giving that had gone up the previous year, and that we had put that in our development plan, and then we're able to follow through with that. So I think that has been essential to our school. And just the opportunity, I think that the benefits are endless, and it gave us the opportunity to dare to dream about where our school's fundraising could soar to, and our focus has been on, for the past couple of years, the participation rate, which we've been very successful with. But as I said, now that we're thinking about all these different other kinds of campaigns, it's endless. I mean, the skills that we've been given and the protocols and just each of the opportunities that we've been presented with through the academy, has given us, I think, the tools we need, and really don't see any limitations as we saw before. We always said, oh, we can't do that. We don't have a director of development, or we can't do that. We don't have the lay leadership buy-in. It really lends itself to the full package, the program that we participated in, and we feel really confident about, short-term and long-term goals.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you both. So before we ask the final questions of some of our panelists, there was a question that someone asked which was about specifically defining the program. And so I'm going to ask Jill and Harry just to very briefly provide the top-level overview, because this may also help some people understand the programs and then trigger some questions that we'll be able to answer in just a minute. So Harry, I'd like to start with you and have you just provide us with the high-level overview of the Governance and Fundraising Academy.
Sure, Jim. So let me give you sort of a chronological view. The program will begin with some in-depth diagnostics of sort of the strengths and opportunities to improve your governance system and your fundraising processes. And we'll be able to compare your performance relative to peer schools from around the country. We will then have an amazing 2.5-day convening with you in teams, head of school, development director, board chair, vice president of development, or your equivalent, coming together, learning from the kinds of experts that you've heard about, learning from your peer schools, techniques for all the things that will take your campaign forward. 7 days of coaching, which is 40% more than in LFA, where your coach over an 18-month period will help you develop plans, set goals, build your capacity, train your board, train your professionals to implement your plans and monitor progress on a quarterly basis. Halfway through the program, another convening, head of school, development professional, take stock of where you are and embellish where needed to kind of take you to the finish line to achieve a minimum of 10% growth in your campaign.
Thank you. And Jill, Generations National?
Sure. So not surprisingly, my focus is all about the outcome. What are you going to get out of it? It's all about changing how you fund your budget. And the how we do that is through a combination of coaching and trainings and PEJE program support. The number of coaching days is 5 per year. So you get 15 days of coaching. Days are defined as 8 hours per day. So the number of coaching hours that you get to support your strategy and your implementation we've found to be just about the right amount for most schools. You also get immediate access to us here at PEJE, where we have a good bit of experience in guiding schools through these kinds of change processes, as well as 2 national convenings, what we call the National Endowment and Legacy Institute. And I am going to ask if both Gary and Sippy can give just brief conclusion remarks about what they really think the value has been to them, and it might even be a little impressive if each of you could explain what you've actually raised. Gary, why don't you start? Sippy, you'll get the next one.
Sure.
The program really has been invaluable. We've been able to. One of the things that happened was we were able to see our donors differently and learn how to listen to them better. And so when we would ask someone or talk to people about Generations, we would find that they would be interested in something else that we were doing, and we were able to shift the conversation to what they were interested in, and we were able to raise money not from those particular donors, not for endowment, but for the different programs they were interested in, renovating the kindergarten yard and things like that. So it prompted us to have more conversations with donors and better conversations with donors. So we came out even better than we had expected, because we're talking about more than only endowment. But in terms of endowment, we've raised $2.8 million in the 3 years in the program, and $2.3 million in cash has been received and pledged. $2.3 million is cash, and $500,000 is planned gifts, bequests, and one life insurance policy. And now we're continuing to ask, and we're focusing a little more on the planned gifts now than we were in the beginning. And that's been really super significant. It's a lot of money, and the money goes right into our operating budget and helps with tuition assistance. So it's just been huge.
Thank you. That's terrific, Gary. Sippy, how about you?
There's no question that it has focused us in a very important way. You know, Rabbi Walber and I do a good deal of fundraising, and he's never been particularly excited about making the ask. When we do it together, you know, he sets them up and I do the ask. Because he's asking, or we are asking for testamentary giving, for endowment giving, it makes it easier for him and for me to have a conversation, because we feel like we're not necessarily asking for cash up front. What that does, which is what the previous speaker just talked about, is it opens up the conversation. So while we're talking, we're comfortable asking for testamentary, and then while we're in the process, we find ways for designated giving and interests of the donor that have all of a sudden become opened up. And so in addition, we've had the consciousness that's raised means that sometimes the donor, believe it or not, will sit in a meeting with us and will say, I'm hearing about all this endowment and testamentary giving. It's less painful for me to do this. I'm going to pledge such and thus for endowment. So it's been very powerful. We are currently in an $18 million campaign. We are $16.6 million towards our goal. Of that, we have raised $6 million in endowment. Our endowment now is above $10 million as a total, plus an additional $16 million on the part of the synagogue. And our campaign, the best thing about what we've learned to do through this process is not be shy about expecting annual giving in addition. I just did a solicitation where somebody gave us $50,000, and in their response to us said, and I know you're going to expect me to continue my annual gift. Okay, there's $3,600 for you, annual giving. I mean, almost as a pat on the head, because they're so accustomed to hearing an integrated ask, and they're so accustomed to hearing how important both sides of our fundraising is to the institution. So we're very excited, and we're having a donor dinner tonight at which Jack Wertheimer actually is speaking, and we can point to $385,000 of the people that are coming to this dinner tonight.
That is fantastic, Sophie.
Very excited.
It's always so inspiring to hear from all of our leaders in the field, and you've just done an unbelievable job of explaining that Generations is not going to cannibalize your annual campaign. Gary, thank you for explaining that you actually have opportunity to shift a donor's, to shift your conversation into the donor's interest. And that's great. We love that. It's not just about endowment for endowment's sake. It's about making sure that your school is sustained with donors who care about you in whatever way they want to give. I do want to address one quick thing, and then I'm going to turn it back to Harry. There's a couple of questions about small schools and what does it actually mean for endowment building in smaller schools, particularly, Lynn, I know your school a little bit. So it's really, the important thing to recognize is that just as in the Governance and Fundraising Academy, Generations is focused on goals that are attainable for your particular school. So this $4,000 per student is accurate only as it pertains to your school. So it's 4,000 times 100 kids or 1,000 kids, depending on what your school is. So it's really tailored to your school's constituencies and your school's abilities. What we know is that schools need approximately 30,000, not million, per student in endowment funds to have that kind of cushion that enables them to do creative, wonderful, amazing things without completely worrying about your budget every single day.
Great, thank you, Jill. So we did receive a number of questions, both actually just before the webinar. Some people emailed us some, and we received some through the chat box. So I first want to invite you to continue to add the questions to the chat box. But I'm going to ask Jill to start with one of the questions, which was, how are coaches matched, and what does that process look like?
Sure. So very quickly, we vet coaches here at PEJE. It's actually one of the services that we provide out of the program. That's really one of the key functions that we provide to you. We've been doing the coach vetting and matching for many years. It's one of our core competencies, because what we know is that the type of match and the type of coach that you are matched with really does correlate with your success. We stay with you. We're not going anywhere. If the coach match is wrong, we're going to be with you to figure out how to make it right. And one of the things that we really do know is that our coaches have been vetted thoroughly. We've worked with almost every single one of them in some previous way, and we are very confident in our coaches when we give them to you to choose.
Great, thank you. Harry, a question came in that I think would be appropriate for you to answer, which is, do I have to choose between the two programs, or can I apply to be in both programs?
So in terms of governance and fundraising and Generations National, you would have to choose between those two programs. If it was a case of Ati Denu, you could then do Ati Denu plus Generations National, or Ati Denu plus Governance and Fundraising. You could also consider a sequencing of programs. I don't know if Jill, if you want to talk about that, or Jim. It's possible, for example, to begin with Governance and Fundraising and then potentially transition into to Generations, although we're still working out those specifics. But right now you'd have to choose between those two programs.
Great. And the Ati Denu program that Harry referred to, I just want to make sure everybody is aware, is our recruitment and retention program. Today we're focusing our discussion on our development programs, but that program is also available. Like all of our programs, the applications are open now. However, spaces are filling up, and we are accepting schools on a rolling basis, so space is limited. If you do believe you're interested in that program or any of these programs, and we'll talk a little bit more about the application process in just 1 second, we do encourage you to take action as quickly as possible. Someone asked about the Avichai grant and what they need to do to apply for that and receive that as part of their program. The answer to that is that there is no additional paperwork. That grant has already been secured by PEJE. We've done the work on your behalf, and so all schools, once accepted to any one of our 3 national revenue programs, are automatically going to receive that 50% match on their enrollment in the program. So there's nothing that you need to do. It's an automatic. Avichai has vetted our program. They believe in it, and so that is why they are putting the money forth. Jill, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, somebody wanted to know that if they're already participating in Create a Jewish Legacy, is Generations National appropriate for them as well?
Yes, it is, and we can work individually with each school to ensure that there's not duplicative efforts. I'm looking at the schools that I see here, and I don't see that there are any schools that are in that category, but thank you for the wide open door for me to walk through and say that each and every one of you, we would like to speak to you individually. Every school has its own issues. Every school has its own um, uh, uh, quirks and thoughts and what we know about a school as what we know about schools in the field is that when you know one school, you know one school. So Harry and I, along with Susie from my team, and Harry has two wonderful people who work with him as well. We are all each available to speak with you, and we will be following up with you as well. But all of the questions that you have, we're happy to answer. These are really amazing opportunities, but we know that this takes a lot to do, and I think from what you've heard from all four of our school lay and professional leaders, you know that these programs are really incredible transformational opportunities. But we want to work individually with each of you to make sure that they're the right fit for both you and for us.
Great, thank you, Jill. I want to quickly get to another question, and we'll have probably time for one or two final questions if you'd like to post them now. The question came in, could our Federation's Development Director be a part of our endowment program, and what might that look like? I think, Jill, you're best to answer that.
Sure. Len, happy to talk to you individually about that. Particularly, it's very interesting, very intriguing. Let's talk.
Great. I do want to be sensitive to everybody's time, actually, and I see that our hour is almost up. I want to thank Jill and Harry, Susie and Solomon in the room with me today, but especially our panelists. We really appreciate you sharing your perspective and your experiences with us. It helps immensely to hear from a peer in the field who has gone through a PEJE program, who has participated, and who has seen the tremendous results that each of you has seen and we believe will continue to see. So I'd like to move very quickly to our last slide, which is what are the next steps? So we encourage you to visit peje.org/National Revenue Program, where you'll be able to see where you'll be able to download product sheets and learn more about each of the programs. There's also a button right there where you can click to begin the application process. And we encourage you to click on that button and begin at least the kicking off of the application process as quickly as possible, because we would hate for schools that we believe are qualified, engaged, and ready to participate in our program to miss out because they just didn't apply and get into the queue fast enough. So we encourage you to begin the process as quickly as possible. We also encourage you to reach out to Jill, Harry, and Solomon, and other members of the PEJE team if you have questions, if you have relationships with somebody here and you want to ask them a question. We're here to help you. We're here to work with you. And we really can't thank you enough for your time today. So again, I would like to thank Jody and Caroline, Sippy and Gary for your time, your hard work, and your dedication to your schools and your communities. And as I started talking about the weather, I hope that you're each having a better day than the rainy wind we're having here.
And I'd like to thank the high quality, and I do mean this. This is not gratuitous, of the professionals on your end. I have to tell you, they are of the highest caliber. And between Jill, Harry, and whatever other coaches we've had, they really are at the top of their field.
Great. Well, thank you for that. We appreciate it. You will be receiving a Survey Monkey in your email tomorrow. We'd ask that you answer those 3 brief questions as quickly as possible and get back to us, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Have a great day.
Thank you all very much.
Bye, all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 2 minutes.